Okay, so now I want to get into a little bit of what worked and what didn't work for each of us in this kind of 3-year process evolution we've been through. So let's start with you and let's put you on the spot.
Sure.
You're good at that. What do you feel like really worked for you in this?
So the impetus to start doing this whole thing was, so we have a wellness program at work, and one of the requirements for it is that you do a blood draw so you can get all of your lab results back, and they care about cholesterol, they care about hemoglobin A1C. There were a few others. I don't recall exactly what they were.
Right.
But so we went and
Hemoglobin A1C is blood sugar, by
Yes,
the way. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we went and had the draw done, and I hadn't had one done in years because I have a fairly paralyzing fear of needles.
Fairly, just a little bit.
Good thing I married an acupuncturist.
The irony.
The irony indeed. I mean, so I hadn't done it in years, and we went and we did it, and I've always been an athletic guy. I've always, been pretty trim, so in my mind, well, I'm perfectly healthy, and at the time I was, in my early 30s. I said, wow, there won't be any problem at all. Well,
Dude logic.
Yeah, dude logic indeed. And, my cholesterol was on the high side of normal. It was still in the normal range, but it was on the very upper end. The blood sugar, same thing. Still in the normal range, but right on that upper end. Mm-hmm. Both of them at the point to where, you should probably do something about these before they turn into actual problems.
Right.
I'm fortunate that they weren't real heavy-duty problems that I needed to deal with, but it seemed to me that being proactive and a little preemptive strike on this thing was going to be much more doable than trying to correct for, decades of mistakes.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you suggested was, well, you should start trying this, this intermittent fasting thing.
Right.
And my first reaction was, no, that's preposterous, and I couldn't conceptualize, just like we're talking before. And then, so we tried it, and then a year later, after making basically no other change.
Right. Yeah, that was a good, kind of one variable study for you. Yeah.
So a year later, we did it again, and we happened to do that. I mean, within days after moving into a new house. And I had literally torn down a single-car garage to make for a new building.
Right, yeah,
so
that. Mm-hmm.
I was a ball of stress. I was overworked. We went in, and the labs weren't that much different. I thought, well, I don't think this is working. But what I did know was working was that in the evenings, I wasn't hungry anymore. Mm-hmm. I was sleeping better, and the mornings were no big deal. At this point, I was at 14 hours.
Gotcha.
And I kind of had my doubts about it. I said, well, I'm going to try and push it. It took that full year. And then I pushed it. I said, okay, well, I'm going to start doing the 16. Well, I did that, and I changed nothing about my diet, and.
Which is not bad to begin with.
It's not bad. There were things that needed to change about my diet, but that's a completely different discussion.
Right.
So a year later, after having been doing the 16 for a while, we went and did labs. All of a sudden, something's different. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The blood sugar had come down. The cholesterol was at a much healthier ratio. And
yeah, well, and just to interject too, I'm going to talk to the camera because I like breaking down the fourth wall. And that cholesterol really, overall, as a naturopath, and I don't speak for all naturopaths, but I am not super concerned about cholesterol in that we need to treat it with a statin or we need to bring it down and it's going to cause heart disease. And there's a lot of studies out now that cholesterol is really not that related, and it's actually healthy to have higher cholesterol, especially the older you get. When they looked at older folks in their 80s or 90s, cholesterol is very protective. And in general, cholesterol is a protective molecule. It mops up inflammation. So really, when we look at cholesterol, we're looking at it as a measure of inflammation. So that's what I see in Chris's lab tests, is that his level of inflammation had come down, from a higher point. And then that's also reflected in the blood sugar, because if you have a lot of blood sugar going around, it's inflammatory to the vessels. The vessels don't want that much sugar hanging out in them, right? They're supposed to get shuttled into the cells. So Yeah, so that was kind of the shift that I was very excited to see for you.
Yeah, and then on sort of a less medical view of it, you know, I started noticing that, you know, after dinner, we'd go for a walk in the evening, and I just felt better.
Yeah.
I felt, I mean, this is a little cliche, but I literally felt younger.
Yeah.
You know, it was more youthful, more spry. I felt like just things were just working a little better. And then the other positive upside to this whole thing, and I chose to mention this last because I think it's the first thing that people think about with this, but really it shouldn't be. It should be the byproduct, is weight. So I'm a big guy. I'm 6'6" tall. So I'm going to carry a fair amount of weight. Just my bones, you know, are going to add up to a lot of weight because I'm big. But when we started the fasting process, I weighed, and it varied, you know, day to day, but on average about 220 pounds. And at 220 pounds, I don't look like I'm a great big roly-poly guy or anything, but it's certainly more than I probably should have been carrying. So at the end of the first year, when I'd been doing 12 and then 14 over the course of that year, I dropped a couple pounds, and it wasn't a drop of, okay, well, I went from 220, and then for a few days I was 217, and then I was back to 220. No, it went down, and it stayed down. Then I went to the 16 fast, and at the end of that year, I was down to an average of 212. And again, that's weight that was staying there. It wasn't fluctuating all the way back up to that 220. I was 212, and it was sort of like, okay, well, this is how much you're going to weigh based on your current lifestyle. 212 is still slightly more than I wanted to weigh, but I think if you look at that and you told almost anybody, well, in this amount of time, I lost and kept off 8 full pounds. I think most people would look at that as pretty appealing.
Without restricting calories.
We had no calorie restriction.
Nothing, the diet changed.
Yeah, and I mean, at that point, I was still doing things that, you know, from a diet perspective, were not great. I mean, several times a week, a coworker and I were going to Starbucks, and I was getting a venti chai with no water, just full fat milk, just big, as much sugar as a Coke, you know. I was doing that several times a week, and I still managed to lose 8 pounds. Now, that's 8 pounds in 2 years. That's not exactly a record-breaking diet.
Right.
But the recidivism of that weight, in other words, it went down and it stayed down. It wasn't this like basketball of weight where it just keeps bouncing back and forth.
It wasn't a yo-yo. I think that's the important thing about this, right, is that it's a sustainable change.
Yes,
and it's
very much so.
Something that with the benefits that you're just self-motivated to keep it up. It's not this thing that you're like, that a diet is supposed to be like short term, right? And oh my gosh, I'm going to try this for a month and we'll see if it works and then I'm off of it. This is something that I think, it's very easy to just integrate and keep doing, and it feels good. That's why we both keep doing it.
It really does. And I mean, what's going to sell people on it is, hey, you might lose a few pounds doing this.
Right.
That shouldn't be what does it. What people should be excited about is, hey, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel, you know, more spry. You're going to sleep better. You know, these kinds of things. It's going to free up your schedule. People don't think about that.
Yeah,
if you don't have to plan for, okay, at this time in the morning I have to eat, and then I have to eat here, and you know, if you just cut out a bunch of that, you get a bunch of time back.
Yeah.
I don't think about it in the morning. I don't wake up and think, how am I going to get in, you know, 3 pancakes and 2 eggs and a piece of bacon before I leave for work in the morning. No, I just get up and take a shower and change and go to work.
Yes, I think that's great. It is actually a time saver in the morning. You just have to plan and bring your breakfast with you later, or brunch, or whatever it is, you know, depending on when you're eating. But And you know, another part of that is there's kind of this notion that if you're going to do something really strenuous, you got to fuel up before you go out. Right.
And
especially with athletic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So, as a great example, and again, as you know, but they don't, frequently, almost every Saturday morning, you and I go sport climbing.
Right.
And we just wake up and go. We don't carbo load. We don't eat a big bowl of spaghetti before we go. We just go and we go and climb. And by the time from the time we wake up to the time that we get back to the house, it's 2.5, 3 hours where 2 of those hours we're doing really physical, really strenuous, hard athletic activity. And it feels great.
It does. It feels really nice to be active in a fasted state. And,
really nice.
We're certainly not experts in that. We just have our own kind of anecdotes. But if you guys want more information about fasting and athleticism, I would really highly recommend you check out Mike Mutzel's podcast. It's called High Intensity Health. He's a cyclist. He was a professional cyclist. And he does all these really amazing kind of interviews with naturopaths and MDs and a whole bunch of really progressive health folks about these big diet questions you have. With fasting is a big thing he covers. He talks about ketosis, but fasting in athletes, he just did one on a few weeks ago. And I think most of them did feel better performance-wise. And I'm sure that is different if you're a massive endurance athlete. That's a whole different ballgame if you're doing ultra marathons and that type of thing.
Certainly.
However, yes, I do in general really love working out in a fasted state, and I don't feel any worse for it.
No, not at all.
And I actually, if I have to eat something, beforehand because it's going to be late and we're going to be, in that, like my adrenal gland stuff might get triggered like 18, 20 hours in, and I eat, then I kind of feel heavy while I'm working out, and I'm just like,
100%.
because you are asking your body to divide its resources, right? 1/3 of your entire blood volume goes to your GI tract whenever you're digesting. That's crazy. Whether you had a Lara bar or a full meal, it will be more sustained, clearly, if you had a full meal, to have that much blood there. But, and then you're also saying, hey, body, digest this, and then also, make my arms and legs work even more than
Right.
I usually ask. So, so it does divide resources and makes it more difficult. So, okay, cool. Well, let me see if there's anything else anything else you feel like worked for you.
I mean, that's definitely the broad strokes of it. It just worked.
Yeah. Well, that's why you kept doing it. You're a very logical guy. I think we need to point out, Chris is very A plus B equals C, and if you don't think it's C, I'm going to tell you it's C, and tell you how it got to be C. He's definitely an engineer, in a loving way. So,
thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. But if something doesn't make logical sense and it doesn't work, he's just not going to do it. That's
right.
It's and I can't even think of the word right now. It's just against the grain of your entire being. It doesn't make logical sense.
Right, work, absolutely.
So,
and it just works like crazy. And earlier we were talking about diet versus fasting, and the sort of the oppositional way between conceptualization and execution. Just like with that opposing idea with a diet, I think most people have this notion of going on a diet, and then when they invariably get off their diet, they're so happy to be off their diet and get to eat their things they want again.
Right.
With fasting, if you told me, hey, you have to get off fasting, I'd be miserable. That sounds awful. Yeah. I don't want to not fast. I mean, it's just, I couldn't imagine wanting to eat in this much wider window. Even going back to a 12-hour fast to me, which was this monumental thing at one point, sounds terrible. I just want to stay on this 16/8 because I feel so much better.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like it. Okay, cool. Okay, so I wanted to jump into a little bit about my experience with intermittent fasting and what I found helpful. So, which you've heard most of this already, I think. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for me that you kind of focus a lot on, kind of physical and how you felt and all the energy and stuff. And I think I felt that too, but I think the biggest thing for me was kind of what you touched on about hunger and truly feeling hungry instead of the mouth hunger stuff, because I do have a history of kind of disordered eating patterns, both restrictive and binging. So for me, starting this intermittent fasting, it was like, oh God, is this really gonna, is this gonna trigger everything, right?
Right.
It was scary. So, but it was nice because I was not restricting calories, which I think was the mental hurdle that helped me get over it, where it's like, okay, this is not the same thing. This is not what I was dealing with before. I think this is a much healthier way to look at things and to improve overall health and well-being and all that. So yeah, I have to say, like what you were talking about in the evening when we stopped, eating late, that was tough, definitely.
Yep.
We didn't really eat that much late, but it was nice to have just a little snack, once in a while. So that was probably the hardest part of the entire thing for me. And then finding that balance to not feel like I was restricting myself. So kind of jumping all over the place here, but I think real hunger, right, rather than being like constantly fed and feeling like you had to eat, and like modern nutritional knowledge about like get up and eat breakfast, that's what you got to do, and just fuel up. And I was definitely doing that, and then it was like, but it just doesn't feel good. So yeah, when I started the intermittent fasting, it was like, oh, okay, and I don't have to worry about that. That's great. So I think developing that real hunger was awesome and super great, because that's your internal compass, right? When you're trying to eat more intuitively, eat in line with what your body actually needs and wants, you've got to clear the slate to be able to listen. And I think that's what I was really trying to find. And throughout this kind of larger picture of like this eating disorder history, that's when you're kind of divorcing yourself from your own voice and your own intuition, right, with what's happening.
Right.
And I think intermittent fasting more than anything helped put me back in touch with that. I've done a lot of self-work around that too, which has been great, but intermittent fasting really clarified that kind of physiological, kind of hormonal side, which was awesome. To feel that and know that, like, yes, I really am hungry. I'm not just like emotionally eating, and I'm restricting time, but I'm not restricting calories. So don't, I didn't trigger the same kind of mental hoops that way.
Sure.
So I think that the improvement with my personal relationship with food was massive, and it was amazing. It was fabulous. So that was like the best thing for me overall. And I think I was in the right place to realize that. I don't know, somebody with a more active kind of disordered eating pattern, it might be harder, but the vestiges were there enough that I was worried it was going to be triggered. So I was very happy that it was not triggered, and it actually helped to heal. So that was the biggest unexpected benefit I felt like happened with intermittent fasting. And then what else did I want to say about that? I did also lose weight, so somewhat, because I made that transition faster than you to that 16-hour state. I lost weight more quickly than you did.
Right.
Probably 6 months or so, I lost 5 pounds, and for me, that's fairly significant. And it stayed off as well, which is great, and it hasn't moved since then. Which, with the calorie restriction and whatnot, that always, that's always that yo-yo. And it's like, all right, when is it going to come back on?
Yeah.
So, I don't know that you have much personal experience with calorie restriction stuff, but...
I did quite the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. That's good. Yeah, it was good. We have both ends of the spectrum here. So, but I do think most women can relate with that calorie restriction, but...
And that certainly seems to be the common way that people think, well, if you want to get healthier, you need to eat less.
Right.
Which sounds just preposterous.
Depending. I mean, again, we are kind of overfed and overweight, but again, most overweight folks and obese people are actually quite malnourished because of the quality of calories that are coming in. So they are actually truly hungry because they're not getting what they need. But yes, so, and that's the other part about fasting, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, was that it redefines when you've only got, 8 to 10 hours to eat, or 8 hours if you're doing the 16, your hunger patterns really change, which I enjoyed too. You felt when you got really hungry and loved to break that fast, and then maybe you only want to eat 2 meals that day. A lot of people transition to that point, or it's 3 smaller meals, or with breaking the fast, you eat a lot at that first meal and then kind of taper off, which is actually much healthier for your digestion to eat more in the beginning of the day, because that's when we're burning all our energy, right? It doesn't make any sense to have this huge dinner and just let it sit when your body's like, okay, I mean, I already did everything for today. So, so I think that was nice too, to see that balance come in, because I was definitely raised in a family that, we ate late, very large dinners, from the Midwest, meat and potatoes. So, it's very hard on your digestion to keep up with that. So it was really nice to feel that shift. And that's what I try to do every day, is pay attention to how hungry I am and not have like a set prescriptive meal necessarily, but be able to adapt depending on where that hunger signal is. Since I know now it's that true hunger signal. So I think those were the main benefits that really worked for me, and it's definitely enough to keep me motivated to continue doing it. And I do really enjoy it for the most part. So
yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. You about ready there?
Wardrobe.
It's probably been almost 20 minutes.
Okay. This looks really professional with the meter rolling now. Roll tape. You're a cruel mistress.
Spoiled.